And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of the Assembly Call. As today, Indiana falls 84-80 to the Michigan Wolverines in Ann Arbor. It was a valiant effort by Indiana to fight back. In fact, Michigan took an 11-point lead, and I tweeted, "Well, this one's officially gotten away from us," and the Hoosiers promptly went on, I believe, a 9-0 run to get right back into it. But ultimately, Michigan was able to make the plays, make their free throws. They closed out this win, their first over the Hoosiers in at least 4 meetings, actually. And the Big Ten champs do what they do, win at home. And I think we can now officially say that Indiana will not be going to the NCAA tournament unless they win out in the Big Ten tournament, which starts on Thursday. But real quick, as you look at this game, you look at the numbers. And just imagine before the game, if I had told you Indiana is going to shoot 59% from the field, they're going to have 17 assists, and they're going to make 88% of their free throws, that Stan Robinson would go 9 for 9 from the free throw line, that 4 Indiana starters would be in double figures, and the other one would have 9, you might think the Hoosiers would win. Unfortunately, the other number that I didn't tell you is that Michigan scored 1.34 points per possession, just absolutely torching Indiana's defense, which, of course, was lauded so much in that first matchup for shutting down Nick Stauskas, holding the Wolverines to somewhere in the 50s scoring. A completely different game in Ann Arbor today, and we're going to break it all down. I'm your host, Jared Morris. I will be joined momentarily by Andy Bottoms and by Ryan Phillips here on this episode of the Assembly Call. Do make sure you go to assemblycall.com/subscribe and get on our email list. You'll, of course, get Andy's in-depth post-game analysis for the rest of the season and then some fun off-season stuff that we will have for you. So real quick, we'll go around the horn with some opening thoughts. To start out, I want to just laud the play of Devin Davis, who got a start today. And just imagine this from the beginning of the season, how absurd this is. Devin Davis starts the final game of the Big Ten season, and he is the only starter who doesn't have 2 turnovers. He, in fact, had no turnovers. In addition to that, he had 9 points. He had some monster rebounds, just continued to play outstanding basketball. We saw him play very well against Nebraska, got the start today. Tom Crean rewarded him with it, and he rewarded Tom Crean with, I thought, just a really, really solid effort. I don't know how many minutes he played, but it had to be 25, 26, maybe even more than that. But an outstanding performance from Devin Davis, and in a season where, again, things haven't gone as we wanted. This team did not live up to expectations. One positive that we can take, especially here late in the year, is the improvement of Devin Davis, the improvement of Troy Williams, who was very good on the offensive end, maybe not so good on the defensive end, but those 2 guys especially have really stepped up here late and shown a lot of growth. And so I know it's a season of negativity and there are going to be some negatives to break down in this game, but I thought those 2 guys especially continued to show growth. So with that said, let's go and get our opening statements from our panel. We'll go with Andy and his bottoms line, and then Ryan's rant after that.
Well, this was another one where it feels like, deja vu all over again. I think we've seen this scenario play out. I mean, there's different little wrinkles here and there, but the general premise of playing really well in stretches and then seeing a large lead evaporate and things really get away from the team. Some of the fight that you mentioned comes back, reels you back in momentarily, and then it's just taken right back away. So I think you wrote it at one point that the history of IU season could be summed up in the first 31 plus minutes of the game. I think the entirety of the game was just as good, and I think that's something I've said before, unfortunately, that it just feels like some of these gut punch type games where the team plays well enough to get a lead and then lets it slip away have kind of been the calling card, if you will, of this year's team. And that obviously not breaking new ground to say that's not necessarily what you want your calling card to be, but that's what it was tonight. I mean, you look down the stat sheet and some of those things, and it's really, you see so many positive things. There were stretches where 4 freshmen were on the floor tonight. And that really led that late charge at the end of the game. And so it gives you some positives to look ahead to, but you also, see the barrage of turnovers in the second half, and, what could have been a great win goes away pretty quickly. So I look back to, I favorited this earlier during the game. Jeremy Price tweeted out, "You folks should be used to this by now. Indiana plays another half of basketball that shows what it could be, not what it is." And I thought that's probably a pretty accurate way to sum up this game.
Yeah, I think that, again, this is just one of those games that's really a microcosm of the season. We've said that about so many of them. But honestly, I mean, on the road against a team that's clearly the best in the Big Ten this year. I thought they played very well in stretches and looked like a team that, you know, could compete with the big boys, even though they didn't finish them off. I mean, I thought they rebounded the ball well. They left a couple shooters open, but Michigan only shot 4 of 15 from three. I'll take that against them anytime. A guy like Jordan Morgan, on his senior day having a double double. You don't usually expect that. 15 and 10 from him. So I mean, there's just some things that you can't make up for, and that the turnovers in the second half, we know, obviously just killed this team. And there's a stretch where I think they had 4 straight possessions where it was Yogi, then Evan Gordon, then Stan. I mean, guys who were supposed to be good at handling the ball, just giving the ball away, and that's when Michigan made that big run. So I mean, it's a tough game, but we've seen it so much from this team, it's hard to get really upset about it. I agree that I think the play of the freshman was really a positive in this one. I thought Troy Williams was excellent offensively, really picked his spots and was super efficient, and made some really big plays, like that huge dunk in the first half, which was amazing. And I thought that Robinson was okay in stretches, but was a little wild with the ball. But he made up for it with his job at the free throw line. And then, yeah, of course, Devin Davis was I think, all around easily his best game of the year. So I mean, there's positives, but at the same time, hopefully you've got to hope that next year all those positives turn into actual wins, as opposed to just explaining why they lost.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those games you hate to lose, and you don't want to accept any moral victories, anything like that. But there were some good things to take from this game. I thought a tweet from Crimson Corey really summed it up. Hoosiers played really, really well when they weren't playing really bad in this one. And that kind of sums it up. And we talked about the defense, and I do want to address that some. The problems Indiana had on defense in this game. But we also know that sometimes games just go up and down. And you have games where both offenses are flowing, and a lot of points are being scored and shots are being made, and this was kind of a game like that. And so while I do think that Indiana's defense certainly didn't play well enough for it to win, the thing is their offense was playing well enough for it to win, except for those few key stretches that we talk about and with those turnovers. And Indiana ends up with 15 total turnovers to only 6 for Michigan, which is why Michigan, took 7 more shots than Indiana. And in a game where you're making 60% of your shots, you've got to maximize your field goal attempts. And there was one really important stretch, I thought, where the turnovers just killed this team. And it is when we cut it to 59-58. Got some momentum back. We had really weathered a storm from Michigan where they could have just put this out of reach. And I thought the team showed a lot of fight. I think Yogi made a 3. Will had a nice little up and under move. We get it to 1, and then we have 2 of the biggest bonehead turnovers of the entire season. Yogi just kind of dribbled it into traffic and lost it. Evan Gordon just basically threw it right to Karis LeVert, I think it was. I mean, just totally unforced turnovers. Michigan gets back out on a run. Of course, they then extend it. And I know Indiana was able to battle back, but it was almost like there were just one too many of those little stretches to battle back from in the second half. And, it does. It leaves you frustrated because you just see the unfulfilled potential that this team left out there. So, Andy, let me kick it over to you. I mean, just in terms of the turnovers, again, this looked like one of those games in the first half. The team is really limiting them. We're getting tons of assists, and that did continue. But, what I mean, I don't want to say what caused the turnovers, because a lot of times it wasn't anything, but it certainly seemed like when Michigan went out to that 1-3-1 zone, it took us a while to adjust to what we should be doing. And whereas in the first half there was a lot of passing, a lot of moving the ball, we just started pounding the ball with the dribble a lot more, which seems to be where we really get ourselves into trouble.
Yeah, I'm curious to look at what the number of possessions were from half to half, because the first half, especially early on in the game, the first 10 minutes or so was really played at IU's pace, and didn't really give Michigan a chance to set up anything defensively, and they really haven't, at least in the games that I've watched Michigan play this year, haven't used that 1-3-1 quite as much as they have in other years, or as much as other Beeline teams have. And he kind of pulled it out tonight. IU really struggled. It slowed the game down, made them think a little bit more, and not just get out and make plays in the open court. And I thought they never really adjusted for they might make a good play here and there, but consistently weren't able to get the ball where they needed to, in the short corner, places like that against that zone. And they just kept throwing the ball into the middle, where that's really where everybody is in that defense. You've kind of you've got three guys kind of forming a line down the center of the court, and they ended up trying to make passes across that a number of times, and I thought that was really their undoing. I think the other thing that happened a lot in tonight's game, and it happened in the first half and didn't quite come back to bite them as much, but we had tons of guys leaving their feet to pass. I mean, I jokingly tweeted that if I took a shot of whiskey every time an IU passer left his feet to make a pass, I'd been dead by, with 10 minutes left in the game. It was just, I think it was, they felt like something was there and guys get in the air and make bad plays, but at this point in the season, it just doesn't feel like, you should have those kinds of issues and those kinds of careless turnovers, because while I do give credit to Beeline from a strategy standpoint and making that switch, I thought that carelessness was every bit as much of a factor to the turnovers as what Beeline was doing there. So I thought it was largely the zone kind of triggered it, but it was really the way that IU reacted to that zone and the fact that I didn't feel like they got nearly as many transition opportunities. And really, when they made the late push in the game, that was kind of the same thing. You had Stan trying to make plays on the break, and some of that was from IU's defense. When you're not forcing misses or turnovers, it's hard to really get out in transition. I thought at least in the first half, Michigan didn't shoot the ball quite as well, where at least gave IU a few opportunities. But in the second half, you're going to let teams, just pound it inside and get easy shots. You're not going to have a lot of chances to get the ball off the rim on a miss or to force a turnover and get out and run. And so, the combination of the zone, the pace of the game, and just general carelessness are probably the biggest factors.
Hey, Ryan, I want to ask you a question here in a second. Don't mute yourself yet, Andy, though, because I want to ask you a question first. But a question about Indiana's struggles in the second half of games. Andy, we've talked a lot of bracketology with you about, is Indiana on the bubble, all that. Let's say that this, the NCAA tournament were just a 20-minute tournament. Where would Indiana be seated just based on its first half performances this year? Clearly, we're a number one seed, right?
Yeah, it's at least in the conversation of a protected seed, I would guess. Yeah, that seems about right.
Yeah. Okay. So Ryan, let me ask you, because again, we're all excited at halftime because Indiana's played very well, but then you remember Indiana's up at Michigan State at the half. We led Minnesota at the half. We led Nebraska at the half. All these games on the road, and we've led plenty of games at home where we struggled. And granted, I thought this halftime lead felt a little bit differently because I thought we had really played well, and the expectations were lower because of who we were playing. But then Michigan comes right out. They go on the 4-0 run. They tied it up with 16:30 to go. So, I mean, whereas in the first half we were able to keep that 5-6 point cushion, throughout the entire half, boom, right within 3.5 minutes in the second half, it's gone, and they really regained control. What is it? I mean, can you pinpoint anything that it is about this team? A lack of energy, a lack of focus, some kind of strategic difference on a game-by-game basis? Like, why does this team so consistently struggle at the beginning of second halves?
I honestly have no idea. I mean, I wish I had an answer for that. And if I did, I'd probably earn a spot on Green's staff. But no, I don't know. I mean, so they just come out flat from halftime sometimes, which is strange because they don't start games flat typically. I mean, they've done that a few times, but really in general they don't. So you have to look at, is it a symptom of them coming out flat? Is it, it can't be the fact that every other team has come out with more intensity after halftime. So I think that it's probably a combination of things. It's young guys, maybe hitting the wall in games a little bit, or and not knowing how to sort of keep that same focused intensity in the second half. But yeah, I don't know, and it's something that the team definitely has to figure out, because it's repeatedly, and then you're having to dig yourself out of a hole immediately at the beginning of the second half, regardless of how well you played in the first.
So let's talk about Indiana's two leaders, Yogi Ferrell and Will Sheehy, who I thought, again, did a very good job in that first half of getting Indiana off to a good start, which I thought was important. And you look at their lines, I mean, Yogi has 16 points, Will has 17. They're both efficient. Will's 7 of 12 from the field. Yogi's 5 of 10 and makes 4 of 8 threes. Yogi had 8 assists. I mean, I thought those guys did a lot of good things. But here's the thing, is they led this team in both good ways and bad, because they both had 4 turnovers. And Several of Will's turnovers were just jumping up in the air and not having anything to do with it. A lot of Yogi's turnovers were kind of over dribbling, getting the ball in a bad spot, and either stepping on the end line or having nowhere to go with it. Again, it's a lot of what we've seen from these guys all season, Andy. And I don't know that there's anything new to say about their performances today that we haven't said all year. A lot of good, but a little bit of bad, and unfortunately, that bad is the turnovers that just killed this team and really prevented them from getting any momentum going, there, in the second half before about the 3-minute mark.
Yeah, and I think that's where you struggle, and you point. We've all pointed to this at various times during the season about the youth of the team, and then you look at. I mean, not that Yogi isn't young. I mean, he's only a sophomore, but from an in-game experience standpoint, definitely not young as much as he played last year and this year. And I think it's easy when you see a team as young as IU to kind of pin some of the turnover issues on that. And you look at some of the stats from the game tonight. I mean, Evan Gordon, I think, had a couple turnovers, and he really didn't play all that well. I mean, that's 10 of the 15 turnovers from arguably your three most experienced players, which I'm not saying other guys are taking the lead from that and saying, oh, well, that's exciting, but I should turn the ball over too because these guys are. But I do think there's a certain level of just taking care of the ball and things like that's a challenge. I think with Yogi, it's a little bit more understandable because he has the ball in his hands so much and is asked to do a lot. And you look at the 8 assists, and it's maybe at least a little bit easier to overlook that or minimize that a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it's just not a good look at this point in the season to have continue to have those kinds of issues, and it really turned into a case in the second half in particular where we just saw another one of those stretches where one bad play leads to 4 more, and the turnovers just seem to come in bunches. I know that's one thing I'll probably look at when I kind of go through the play-by-play of the game is how bundled up some of these turnovers were, because I think we'll find that there were just kind of came in waves and really turned the game, because at the time they were happening, I mean, that was also when IU just couldn't stop Michigan at all, and so it just compounds upon itself.
All right, Ryan, I want to take a moment real quick and just kind of enjoy the wonder that is Noah Vonleh rebounding. I know that he struggles some offensively with, kind of where to be, and, his shot can be a little bit slow, even though he did, knock down that big three-pointer, and he doesn't get as many field goal attempts as we want. But my goodness, watching that guy rebound is just one of the most fun things I think we've been able to do as an Indiana fan in a while. And the more I watch him rebound, the more he reminds me of Alan Henderson, just in terms of his timing, the way he attacks rebounds. I mean, it's just a marvelous talent that he has that was really on display in the second half when I thought he got a lot of huge rebounds for Indiana.
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of things for Noah. He's got absurdly long arms, absurdly big hands. But he's also just got the instinct for rebounding. Some guys just have that innate instinct of where the ball's going to be, how to high point it, that can make up for any physical deficiencies. But he has no physical deficiencies as a rebounder, and he's just relentless at it. I would say that Vonleh, you said it was one of the most fun things to watch for an Indiana fan. I'd say his rebounding and Victor Oladipo's defense are the two things that, I mean, just I could watch a guy do that in a gym all day. It's
and
just,
Jordan Hull shooting threes.
Well, yeah, okay, we'll give you that. But Jordy's shot was a little ugly and everything, but it would go down. So yeah, I mean, it was That's just thing. Yeah, it's just it's one of those things that just is an innate talent on top of the fact that he has all the physical gifts you could possibly want to accomplish that. And yeah, it really is amazing. He is a phenomenal rebounder. I remember, when they recruited him. We talked about him briefly. I think it was off air actually, and I told you he's by far the best rebounder in this class. It's nationally, it's not even close. He's just a relentless rebounder, and again, it's a combination of physical traits, and he just has that innate ability to know where the ball's going to be, where to get it, how to high point it, and bring it down, secure it, and not get it knocked away and things like that. So it really is an unbelievable natural gift that he has, and he has all the makings of a guy who's going to be one of those amazing rebounders for years to come.
Andy, I want to talk real quick about Stan Robinson, who did, it was a very Stan Robinson game today. I mean, he did a lot of good things, did some not so good things, especially at the very end of the game. I mean, we are not close enough to even, be within breathing room there late if it's not for Stan Robinson. His ability to get to the bucket and then to make free throws, that 9 of 9 line from the stripe for him today is just remarkable. Had 3 rebounds, 3 assists, did a lot of good things. But he had a couple turnovers, and he had what I thought in a game where Indiana's shot selection was outstanding. I mean, you don't shoot 60% without having good shot selection. Probably took one of the poorest shots of the season, I thought, when you consider time, circumstance, and then the ability of the player taking it. I think it was out of a timeout where Indiana's down 3, and off of 2 passes, he took that three-pointer from the right wing. And, look, we love Stan. He's done a ton of good things in the game, but he's not a three-point shooter. And even though he was open for a reason, because Michigan knows that they don't need to be running out to him. And really that, from there, Indiana really didn't have much of a chance after that. Discuss, if you will, just Stan's contributions and, that unfortunate shot attempt he took there at the end.
Yeah, I mean, I really thought that shot was, I mean, that was we talk about some of the no, yes shots. I mean, if ever there would have been one had that gone in, that would have been it, because the minute he even looked at the basket, I was yelling no at the TV. I think with him, it's just difficult, because I think I even said this when we were watching the game at home tonight. I said it's so difficult because he does things that make you want to kind of pull your hair out, where he gets himself into traffic and doesn't always have some place to go. But he's completely fearless, and I think you made the comment that he reminds you of an NFL cornerback, where nothing really seems to faze him, and no matter how bad the previous play went, he's just unfazed and relentless in going back in there and trying to make things happen. And I think, in cases where there have been times this season, more times than I can count, where guys were content to stand around and wait for something to happen, it's great to have a guy like him on the floor who's, that aggressive. And there's 2 sides to that aggressiveness, and one is taking a shot like that, and the other is, all the good things that he did as part of it. So I think with him, we should see the scales over time, tip more toward the smart aggressive plays as opposed to the just recklessly aggressive plays. I think that'll be part of him, just getting older and getting better. I think that'll be part of him getting a better jump shot and having more confidence in that part of his game. And I think he's a guy who we'll really see develop quite a bit. But for now, he's clearly a guy that makes enough plays where almost no matter what he does, I'm going to argue that he should be on the floor. So while that was a terrible shot, I really think that what he brings to the table for this team is something that I'm not sure anybody else on it really has. So in that regard, I look forward to watching him grow and maybe making fewer of those kinds of plays that make me yell no at the TV. But definitely his aggressiveness was a huge factor tonight.
Yeah, I think that the thing about Stan is he's uber confident, which is a great thing especially for a freshman. And he's got gigantic stones to take a shot like that. And it's, on the one hand, we can sit here afterward and be like, oh God, why did he take that? But honestly, if he had passed that shot up and nobody else was really open or had a chance to do anything, I mean, we'd probably be not second guessing, but being like, maybe he should have taken that. Because he was wide open. Let's not, it wasn't a contested shot. He was absolutely wide open. He's not a three-point shooter, but at the same time, it's, a guy that confident gets the ball and sees that much of an opening. It was probably inevitable that he was going to shoot it, especially because Yogi was overplayed. Nobody else was really open. I mean, but and I'm sure he'll get talked to about that. But I'm not sure you can really be mad about a guy taking a wide open shot when you're down 3. He gets a great look from 3, and when it rattled in and out, it was. I mean, wasn't like he airballed it. But at the same time, you guys are right. I mean, he's not a 3-point shooter, and I thought that today he did make some bad decisions, but at the same time, his aggressiveness, as Andy was saying, opened up so much and is such a key part of the offense. And when he's in there, and can be, and then uncharacteristically hit 9 of 9 free throws. I mean, he hasn't been a good free throw shooter this year, but on the road in a tough environment, he concentrated and knocked down all his free throws. So that was big too. So yeah, he's a guy that, as Andy said, he's going to be fun to watch develop because as we've all said, if Troy Williams and Stan Robinson can shoot jumpers, this team is going to go absolutely go to the next level, regardless of what everybody else does next year, because those two guys can drive it and finish it at the rim, and if they can, diversify their offensive games, this team's going to be really tough to guard.
Excellent segue, because I want to talk about Troy Williams next. This guy in his last two games, he had 18 against Nebraska, 16 today, and he was 7 of 12 from the field against Nebraska and 8 of 9 from the field against Michigan. And like you mentioned, Troy obviously not a good shooter, so what do those shooting percentages tell you? He's getting good looks, and most of them are dunks. And that was what was so impressive about his game today, was just his offensive. Troy's always been active. I mean, he's always moving and doing things, but he is starting to have smart activity. His awareness is really improving. I think he's making smart cuts. He's making himself available for passes. And we know when he gets them, he is just absolutely attacking the rim with some of those vicious dunks we've ever seen in Indiana uniform. But for him to be that efficient on the offensive end, I thought was huge for this team. Now, the defense still leaves a lot to be desired. His feet are terrible. His awareness is not very good. They've got to, I think, we talk a lot about Troy Williams getting a jump shot, and I think that is huge. The other thing he's going to have to do is get better on defense, Andy. But, again, freshmen are not, even though, the old cliche is, now freshmen or sophomores because it's the end of the year. Well, whatever. They're still not going to be complete players yet. And we're seeing that with these guys. Troy's improving on offense. His defense is still lacking. And Stan's really competing on defense and doing some good things on offense. His decision-making sometimes is lacking. So, these guys are still incomplete players, but certainly Indiana didn't lose today because of them. They were a huge part of the fact that Indiana was in this game. But specifically with Troy, I thought offensively, his most impressive performance of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's really doing a better job of moving without the ball. And I mean, again, I guess I kind of go back to some of the stuff we've talked about with guys just standing around, and you get people driving. He's done a much better job of doing that in the half court. Obviously on the in transition situations, he's lethal, and we knew that already. But I think he's just doing a better job of moving without the ball. Guys are able to find him. I know the one big dunk he had at the end was on a putback, and I think those are the kinds of areas right now where he can really impact the game. And I think you'd like to see him develop over time into not maybe into a Will Sheehy, but that kind of game where he does well moving off the ball. You get him a nice mid-range jump shot, and I think that's really he can be so effective there, because if he can get guys to respect his jump shot and be able to use his first step and get around people, he's going to be a really tough cover. Whether he ever becomes a great three-point shooter or not, I don't know, but I certainly thought on the offensive end he was great. And then defensively, he made a couple plays where he was able to get deflections and things like that. He just in a one-on-one situation really struggles, and I think still learning that closing out on shooters where he's athletic enough that I think he feels like he could maybe block more shots than he can, and sometimes he comes out a little bit out of control. And I know fouled jump shooters at least once or twice that I can remember in this game. So we'll definitely be there, but at least he's got the athleticism to be able to play well defensively. I think it's just a matter of technique and being a little bit more under control on that end of the floor. But definitely he's given a great glimpse of what he could be over these last handful of games. And as we start to get into the point where we're looking ahead to next season, that gives reason for optimism.
And Andy, real quick, your thoughts on Devin Davis. I led the show talking about him, but I mean, just what I really liked about Devin today was how he was attacking the basket. We've seen him either get rejected or not even be confident enough to go up, but he was even in some bad positions underneath the basket, found a way to step through, have a nice reverse layup, had a dunk, got some big rebounds. I mean, we're really seeing a guy who is coming into his zone. I don't know if Hunter Perea was hurt or why he didn't play, but Devin has clearly stolen all of his minutes. A little bit, on the rebounding end, he's kind of a poor man's Noah Vonleh because he's not as big, not as athletic, but he attacks the rebounds. But your thoughts on Devin?
Yeah, I thought, somebody asked me on Twitter why he hadn't been playing more, kind of made some comment about Crean not playing more. I mean, I don't think he could have done this earlier in the season. So, for as much as I tend to be the one of us that's the most critical of Crean, certainly in this case, I didn't feel that was the case. I mean, when he played earlier in games this season, he would show some of those flashes where, being that, effort and that potential glue guy and all those kinds of things, but he was so sporadic in what he was doing that he, made just silly plays and turnovers, which clearly is no different than anyone else on the team at this point. But, I really think while he's undersized, he plays a little bit bigger than that. He was able to, chase a ball down in the corner that kept that gave IU back possession, then went down the other end and got an offensive rebound and a putback. And I thought, he just, he's not going to make a spectacular play, and that maybe sets him apart from some of the other guys, but he, to me, is a guy who really can be a huge part of this team, the kind of four-year player that you really want to see and root for over his time at IU. So I don't know that he's going to do any one thing that's going to wow you, like a Troy Williams dunk or a crazy drive to the rim that Robinson has, or some of the rebounds that Vonleh can get, or other things he can do on the offensive end. But I think he's got a little bit of everything, and if he continues to develop and take advantage of this, you look ahead to next year's team, there's going to be minutes to be had in the front court, and I think he's going to be a huge part of that.
Well, and the main reason why Devin wasn't playing there is because he was just turning the ball over too much. I mean, you look at coming into today's game, he had 18 turnovers and 22 made field goals, okay? And the last 3 games where he's played 8 minutes or more, against Iowa, he had no turnovers and 1 field goal. Against Nebraska, he played 15 minutes, no turnovers, 3 field goals. Today against Michigan, played 25 minutes, no turnovers, 4 field goals. So he's cut down on those turnovers, and he's giving Indiana something on the offensive end, and he wasn't doing that. So I think that's a great point. He wouldn't have been able to do this earlier in the year, and so I think as his development has gone on, he's gotten more minutes, and it culminated with what we saw today, and hopefully will continue on into the Big Ten tournament. Ryan, I know you love Devin Davis. Let's get your thoughts on him too.
Yeah, I just think when you look at Devin Davis and people saying, oh, he should have been playing earlier in the year and things like that, Andy's absolutely right. He wasn't ready yet. I mean, and maybe in some of the non-conference schedule, but not in the Big Ten. And he's a guy who, he's 6'6", he's super strong. He is athletic. He's deceptively athletic because he's such a big guy. I mean, he looks, he's built like a linebacker basically, but he's athletic and he's a bulldog. I mean, he reminds me of sort of like an A.J. Moye kind of guy where he plays bigger than his size. But also what you have to remember about Devin is he played strictly as a post player in high school, and as soon as he got his IU scholarship, they started, he started working on becoming more of a guard. And I don't think he will be a guard. I think he will, become more of a small forward kind of, maybe, a stretch 4 kind of guy. But yeah, he's working on his jump shot, working on things like that. But he's a guy who always gives you energy, always plays defense, always rebounds. I mean, and he will be that guy. And you also have to look at it, people will talk about, him not playing earlier in this year. Devin Davis is a 4-year guy, and he's going to be a huge part of this program for 4 years, I believe. And so, yeah, you've got to sometimes with these 4-year guys who aren't NBA prospects and things like that, you've got to kind of have the long view on their careers that he's going to be around for a while, and so his development may not be like Vonleh or someone like that who's ready to start and play right away, or Stan Robinson who's out mixing it up, early in his freshman year. He's a guy that's going to maybe be a slower developer, but will show you the things you want to see from a glue guy and a 4-year guy and somebody who's going to be in there and battling for a long time for IU.
And if we think back a few games, remember how we all thought, hey, maybe the movement was reemerging with Jeremy Hollowell and Hunter Perea. Well, they haven't been able to put together back-to-back games after they had played well. So that storyline's kind of died here at the end of the season. And the one that's emerged is that, hey, these freshmen, they're pretty good. And not just Noah Vonleh, but this class really improving. And I think that's what's getting me a little bit more frustrated about this game as I think about it. And Andy, I'll go to you on this, is the freshmen played really, really well today for the most part in a very tough environment. Let's put it this way. They did everything you could expect of them. And, Indiana loses this game by 4 points. That's a couple possessions here and there, especially in the game where you're almost shooting 60%. And the 8 turnovers by your 2 leaders, Yogi Ferrell and Will Sheehy. I mean, if you can get 2, 3, 4 of those back, maybe those turn into buckets. And then and again, just the team's real inability to adjust, especially on defense there in the second half. Again, it's just it's kind of frustrating me as I think about it, because that's a game that's there for the taking. Indiana should probably have. So I don't really have a question with that. It's just kind of a thought. But I know we are going to start running out on time, Andy, and you got to run. So I will kick it over to you. If you have anything that you want to talk about or give your final thought, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I'll say my final thought. We can transition to that whenever in the next few minutes. I mean, in terms of that, the one thing I will say is that for as frustrating as some of the turnovers were from Sheehy, I thought he really kept him in the game early when the freshmen really weren't playing that well. Williams had a couple nice plays early, but Robinson I think did a lot of his damage in the second half. Davis was okay, but not great. Vonleh didn't even play a ton in the first half, so I did think when out of the gate, he got off to another hot start, which seems to have been a bit of a theme over the latter part of the season. So I thought that was good, and so that's kind of the one thing there. I think something else that I tweeted about earlier and meant to bring up when we were talking about Davis was, with Vonleh, Crean was in a bit of a difficult dilemma, it felt like, in the first half, and even at times in the second half, where I really felt like when he was on the floor, Vonleh, I mean, I thought the offense wasn't as fluid, and they really seemed to, things kind of seemed to bog down where you had more of that standing around. On the flip side of that, IU just got hammered inside when he wasn't in there. I thought a lot of, Morgan played really well, but he was getting offensive rebounds over guys he had a good 3-4 inches on, and we know how much Vonleh impacts the game there. So I think that was the one area where it was a little bit odd, where I felt like he probably wanted to go with that freshman group, and certainly could have justified it earlier, but it was challenging because you couldn't quite figure out the right combination of some of those guys. At least I felt that I noticed that early on. I don't know if you guys thought the same, but just seemed to kind of struggle when he was in. Now that late stretch he was in the game, and they played a little bit better, but I did think things kind of bogged down, and it's funny to look at that when you compare it to how things were in that Ohio State game. I think mentioned some of those comments, or at least maybe it was Crimson Cast or some podcast I listened to at least was talking about, with him not in there, it seemed like things moved a little bit better, and I felt a little bit the same way. I don't really put that on Vonleh, but it's kind of an odd observation when things offensively almost seem better when one of your best players isn't on the floor. Just seemed kind of strange, and I noticed a little bit of the same thing tonight.
Yeah. So no, and Ryan, let me ask you about that, because that is an odd observation, especially from a guy, a potential lottery pick who has so many skills like Noah has. I mean, how does that happen then? Why does the offense get bogged down, seemingly, when he's in there?
Well, I think that part of it is we have so many guards and we don't have shooters. We have guys who drive and get into lanes and things like that, like a Stan or a Troy, or even a Yogi to some extent, or Will too. And when you take that guy out of the middle, the lane clogger kind of guy, on a driving team, you open up lanes and you spread the defense out, so there's not as much help when you're driving in, and there's nobody sort of standing in the paint just waiting for you to get there. That can end up not working against the zone, but in man-to-man situations, it can really open driving lanes when you spread the floor like that. Again, that's not my ideal situation. I think you need to have a post player and you need to have shooters, so it's a balance like we had last year, basically. But on a team like this, where there aren't those shooters to spread the floor naturally, having the post player out of there can open things up. Again, it's not necessarily ideal, but with the combination of players we have right now, that might actually help to a degree against certain teams and certain defenses, just opening up the floor and being able to attack with the drive, as opposed to having more of a balanced set where you've got the inside guy, you've got your shooters, and then you've got your drivers. So I think that just with this team, I think that, and the defenses they ran into, that wound up helping the offense just to be able to spread the floor and get that guy out of the middle. But again, you don't want that. What you want is to find a way to keep a guy with Vonleh's talent in the game, have your best drivers on the floor, and also have people who can shoot it and spread the floor naturally that way. So, it's one of those major upside downside things. At times, the offense looks better when Noah's not on the floor, but that's not what you want because you want that presence offensively and defensively. So yeah, I think it's just really a symptom of who they were playing, the defenses they were facing, and the way this team is currently structured, being able to spread other teams out and take advantage of driving lanes.
So what you're saying is that Tom Crean should have given James Blackman more minutes.
Yeah, hey, his high school career is over. Can he just be eligible now? Is that how it works?
Yeah, I wish. A couple of real quick questions here before we go to our final thoughts. Question on Crean from the hospital ball. Realistically, where do we go after Crean? I mean, I put this question up there only to kind of highlight the absurdity of it, because Crean's not going anywhere. Even if you don't agree with his coaching tactics and give him credit for some of the success, just because of the contract, he's going to be here for the next at least 3 years. I mean, it's going to happen, and especially when you consider the fact that this team is talented enough to keep winning games, he's going to be here. So,
if we win just 10 games in the next 2 years, he's still going to be here, folks.
Yes.
He's not going anywhere. I don't this is what drives me nuts, and the answer I get from everybody when I say, "Oh, well, realistically, who would we go hire?" And people always say, "Oh, Brad Stevens." Well, we're not going to outbid the Celtics for Brad Stevens. It's not going to happen, especially when we're paying off another coach, especially with how far in the red our athletic department is. We're also not, somebody else said Jim Cruz from St. Louis. Like, look at Jim Cruz's career record, and don't just look at the 2 years he's had with Rick Majerus' players. No, thank you. So yeah, I don't. People are just ridiculous about this kind of stuff. Crean's our coach. He's going to be here. This was always going to be a tough year. We said it from week one of the podcast. Do not expect anything. This is not the same team as last year. It's a young team. It's a transitional year. It's going to be disappointing at times. Just support your team. The coach, we can question his decisions, and I think that's fair to go in and pick apart his decisions and stuff like that. But yeah, to call for the guy's firing less than a year after we won our first outright Big Ten title in 20 years is absolutely absurd.
I agree with you, and it's totally fair game to critique, like you said, but it's just yeah, yeah. Basically, it's not even a discussion point about him not being here because he's going to be here. So anyway, Ryan, thank you for getting all worked up there at the end of the show. One other question that we have here.
I need to take a breather, so you guys just talk amongst yourself.
Yeah. One other question that we have here, and Andy, I'll transition to you here. This is from Chris Olson, with how easily Michigan was getting layups when Vonleh wasn't in, how does Honor get 0 minutes? He at least changes shots or fouls. Now, I don't bring this to you to necessarily defend Honor getting in, because I thought Honor played very, very badly against Nebraska. Just didn't think he gave us a lot. And I thought if Noah's not in there, you got to have Devin Davis in. And Hunter's just been such a mixed bag, so who knows? There had to be some reason why he didn't play. But I transitioned this to you, and then feel free to go into your final thought afterwards. But again, and we maybe haven't covered this enough today, is a big issue for Indiana was defense. I mean, after doing so well against Michigan, they give up 1 point, almost 4 points per possession today. Is there anything else that you think Indiana could have or should have done defensively to adjust what Michigan was doing?
Well, I thought the big thing. Well, I guess I'll address the Perea part of it first. Given how he played the other night, and quite honestly, I don't know who you take out if you want to put him in. Williams was playing well, Davis was playing well, Robinson was playing well, and then you got Sheehy and Yogi, who, despite the turnovers, are at least guys that can make shots and make plays. I'm not sure anybody would advocate putting him in over either of those guys. So if you want to put him in, I'm not sure who you do it at the expense of. And I thought in general, what Michigan really did, I looked at this a little bit earlier, and we really didn't, I couldn't find a way to, weave it in, but they shot, just a little bit over 25% of their shots in three-point range. And now that sounds, if you take that just by itself, doesn't really mean anything. But if you look at the fact of what they've done over the course of the Big Ten season, and really the season overall, they've taken close to 40% of their shots from three-point range. So, they took 26.8% from there tonight, and really at one point late in the second half, I think it was Jordan Littman tweeted out, they had only taken 2 threes. Obviously, Glenn Robinson hit the huge one down the stretch, but they really completely shifted what they were trying to do offensively and try to take advantage of their ability to beat guys off the dribble, and they were just breaking people down. There weren't a lot of screens involved, and I think that's something that we talked about IU struggling with even last year was containing guys off the dribble. And I thought, Levert and Stauskas and really any number of guys were able to get into the lane against IU. And I thought that was, a great move on Beeline's part to really try to exploit that and, defensively kind of dare IU to make shots in the half court and really attack them off the dribble on the other end. And I thought that was a difference. And I agree that maybe Perea altered some of those shots, but I'm not sure that based on what we saw from him, at least the last game out, and how Davis was playing tonight, that he gives you something significantly different, than Davis was giving.
Let's go around the horn, Andy. Final thought, and then we'll wrap this up.
Yeah, I think feel like we're 30-ish games into the season. I don't know that I have anything different to say tonight than I probably did after the first few games where we talked about what a roller coaster season it's been, and we've shifted even from the roller coaster within the season to the roller coaster within the game, and have pretty much perfected the art of raising expectations and then punching people in the nuts. And I think if anything, maybe this is what this season will be remembered for, is just turnovers and completely uneven play. And I really think that the tweet I read from Jeremy Price early in the season, kind of summed it up as well as you can. You've seen what this team can be, and I think that's why, while the Crean questions are a little bit absurd given the contract situation, I think the frustration is born from seeing a team that has played the way that it has at times this season play great at other times, and I think part of that is just that frustration, bubbling over and thinking about what could have been had the team played like it has in some of these stretches, over these last few games and even throughout the Big Ten season. I think that's, again, when you think about things the season might be remembered for, I think it'll be some of those frustrations and just the unevenness in games and things like that. And, right or wrong, I think that's probably how I'll remember this season, despite whatever the expectations were. I think that, watching the team play so well at times has, is frustrating to look at and then look back and see some of these other times and some of the other games that were lost that, you win some of these other games, a close loss at a tough team like Michigan tonight doesn't put nearly the final nail in the coffin as this one does, because they played so poorly in other winnable situations. So it definitely has been an odd season, and we'll see what happens in the Big Ten tournament. I was trying to look ahead to who they might play in the first round, and there's so many teams around the 6-7 win mark, and most of the remaining Big Ten games are tomorrow. I have absolutely no idea who they would play. I do know that during the game they flashed up that if the season ended today, they would be lined up for a meeting with Wisconsin in the second round, which means I'll probably not watch the Big Ten tournament, and I will just go from there. So that would just be fitting to end the season with end the regular season with a loss to them in the Big Ten tournament. But I think there's a lot of things to be played and a lot of teams right around that 6-7 win mark. So we'll find out at the end of the day tomorrow who they'll play on Thursday, and we'll go from there, because all our eggs are firmly in the Big Ten tournament basket at this point.
An event that we have dominated in the past, so we are ready for this.
Absolutely. We're due, if nothing else. I mean, you can at least point to that.
Law of averages will come through for us. Okay, Andy, if you have to leave, man, thanks for your time. And I'm assuming that we'll have an email to send out tomorrow or in the near future about this game, so we will look to do that. Ryan, before we get to our final thoughts, I want to ask you something that I just started thinking about. Tom Crean had an interesting tweet. Yeah, his comments are being tweeted, obviously, by the guys who were there. And he said that, he thinks that we're really starting to play our best basketball, and that maturity turns into consistency, we'll be a really good team, talking about the young guys. And, and talking about how today we just kind of ran out of time, which, I don't know that that's necessarily the case. But, his comment about, that we're playing our best basketball is interesting to me, because I tend to agree with him. And having those 3 home games against really good opponents, I thought for the most part we played well. Obviously not the Nebraska game, especially in the second half, and I thought in a lot of ways we played well today. And it seems like as we've gone through this Big Ten season, we've gotten a little better. I know it's been a roller coaster in games, and there in the middle part we really struggled, but it seems like the team has kind of found something now. Do you think at all, and this may just be a totally ridiculous question by me, so tell me if it is, do you think at all that if this team had played tougher competition early in the season, the non-conference, before they got to the Big Ten, had a chance against tougher teams, both at home and on the road, to forge an identity, that maybe some of the gains they've made here late in the season, they would have made some of those early, not stubbed their toe as much early in the Big Ten season in that middle part, and not been in a situation here late where all these games, there's so much pressure on every single one, and even though we won some of these late, you lose someone, like Andy said, it puts the nail in the coffin, but I just wonder if this team had been challenged more early. Now, maybe they lose a few of those games, but then maybe they win some on the back end of the Big Ten because whatever they've started to find here late, they would have found it early. Is there any credence to that whatsoever?
It's an interesting question because with such a young team, I think with an older team, that might be a great strategy because they've been through wars and stuff like that. They know how to maybe come through and win those games. With a young team, if you lose some of those games early on and you rack up 4 or 5 losses in the non-con, you may bury them, and have to really dig out and start from scratch. I'm not saying that's what happens. I'm saying that that's a possibility. So it's a really delicate balancing act, knowing which way to go. And let's remember also the schedules are typically made a few years in advance. So it's, I've also heard that people blaming Crean for the non-conference schedule. He has some input, but it's set by the athletic department. They have to make agreements with other schools. I mean, yeah, our non-conference schedule was terrible this year, but at the same time, I mean, these things are planned out in advance. It's not like, we went into the summer and said, all right, we've got a young team. Let's play some crappy teams and just get them some confidence. So it's a tough question because you're right. I mean, if they had played in some of those tougher games, maybe you see growth a little earlier with this team. But at the same time, we also may have been buried by, if you lose a couple games in a row, you ruin those kids' confidence right when they step on campus and into games. So, again, it's one of those things where there are competing philosophies on it. Some people think, no, you challenge them from day one. Some people think, no, ease them into college basketball, get them some wins, get them some confidence, and then when they play, the better parts of their schedule, they've got confidence and they're ready to go. So, there are competing philosophies on it. I don't know. I mean, I think that we played well at times early on in the Big Ten, but you're right, and I think Creed's right. This last stretch has been the most consistent they've played, and they've played tougher teams. Iowa, Ohio State, Nebraska's playing well, Michigan, obviously, and in those games they've played better than they have earlier in the year. So, yeah, from a full standpoint, if you pull back and look at the season, this stretch has been their best basketball. I think in game to game, it doesn't feel that way necessarily all the time, but I think it's pretty obvious that yes, this team has gotten better slowly and is slowly playing better and has seen some growth.
We're now at the point in the program where Troy Williams is tweeting out and Instagramming out pictures and Vine videos of his best dunks. I want to ask you a question about this, Ryan, because this may just be like kind of a a get off my lawn thought and feeling by me. I really like Troy. I like him a lot as a player. I think he's really going to develop. It kind of rubs me the wrong way a little bit that he'll kind of put those pictures out there after losses that we can be kind of where we are in the Big Ten, playing the Big Ten champs, and he'll dunk on somebody and kind of woof at them. Maybe that's just me, and I'm just kind of turning into an old fuddy-duddy here as I reach my mid-30s. Is that at all a thing to you? Like, does that bother you at all, or do I just need to kind of suck it up and say that's just, whatever, that doesn't even matter?
I just think that's the way it is with players these days. I just think that's what they do, and I think it's part of the culture of the game that's developed. And again, I don't think it's, when a kid does that, I don't think he's necessarily thinking that he's showing anybody up or anything like that. It's just he's excited, and, that's how he reacts, and it'll rub the opposing fans the wrong way. It'll rub some of the older fans the wrong way, but I think that's just in the AAU culture we've created. I think that that's part of the game. I really do think that has become part of the game, and these kids are always showcasing, and at these AAU tournaments, I've been to a few of them. They're essentially big cattle calls where these kids have to distinguish themselves and show off, and because they're competing against 1,000 other guys. for attention. And so I think that it develops into people's games, and it's just part of the game these days. And it's one of those things where when we started making club basketball such a priority in recruiting and things like that, and made it into such a big national business, this was the byproduct of it. So we've kind of asked for this as fans, for following recruiting and making it such a big deal and turning these kids into stars before they're even on a college campus. I think that this is a byproduct of that. I think that we love following recruiting. We love seeing, watching the guys who are going to be on our team next year and getting excited about their potential. But at the same time, you've got these kids that have 7 different highlight tapes and all these other things, and they want to outdo each other and stuff like that. And I don't think it's a vicious thing. I think it's just sort of a playful competition thing that 18-year-olds have. So I just think the whole thing is a symptom of all of that, and it's not. I think kids just do that these days, and that's the way it is. And I don't think they mean anything by it. It's not Allen Iverson stepping over Eddie Jones or whoever that was that he hit that 3 over on the Lakers. I mean, it's not. There's not really that. It's just sort of a thing that has just developed with kids these days.
Yeah, and I'll say, look, no Hoosier that I can remember ever hunted dunks and highlight real plays like Troy Williams. But here's the thing, is it seems to have really motivated him to play a different style of basketball here lately, and I think he's seeing that when he cuts and when he's active and when he's aware on offense, he gets more of those plays, and so he's shown a lot of growth in that sense. And so, anyway, I don't know. I know I've heard other people, kind of comment about that with Troy Instagram and that stuff, and I don't have a huge problem with it. I guess it's just kind of the old school, short shorts cheering for IU fan.
Totally. No, and I get that, and I get that perspective. I'm an old school basketball guy. I played what is called, when I grew up in San Diego, there were 2 styles of basketball. There was Los Angeles basketball and there's Philadelphia basketball. I was taught how to play Philadelphia basketball, which is rough. It's not pretty. It's and LA basketball is the Showtime basketball. I mean, that's the Lakers of the '80s and that kind of stuff, and the up and down game and dunking and So I side with you on some of that as well, but I just think that he's a kid who's excited that he had a highlight play that could be on ESPN. I mean, and it's like, okay, we lost, so really should he be tweeting that stuff or whatever? But you know what? His family's probably all tweeted this stuff at him and is like, oh, look at this, they were talking about your dunk and you were on ESPN and all this stuff, and he's probably just like, oh, cool, and having fun with it. So I just he's an 18-year-old kid. And he is probably just, having fun. He's not used to the national exposure and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, obviously it's going to bum some people out, but at the same time, you got to remember at some point these are kids and they're having fun and they're playing a game.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you. Okay, so let's go to some final thoughts here, Ryan. And let me ask you this. Let me lead you into your final thought this way. Obviously now, from an NCAA tournament perspective, everything hinges on the Big Ten tournament. I'm sure Indiana's probably going to make it into the NIT after that, but we've got this Big Ten tournament, and I have had absolutely zero confidence about this event the entire season. I mean, I thought if it came down to making a run in the Big Ten tournament, we pretty much have no chance, both just because of the inconsistency of this team, especially away from home, and just our horrible, awful, terrible history in the Big Ten tournament. It has just conditioned me to expect nothing but the worst, like most IU fans. I will say, I didn't have a whole lot of hope going into this game against Michigan. And like Tom Crean said in his post-game press conference, the team really came out to play. And I'll give him and the guys credit for that. They really did. With kind of quote-unquote nothing to play for, at least in terms of a realistic shot of the bubble or in the Big Ten standings or anything like that, they came out and they really fought and I thought played really confidently. So I was pleasantly surprised. And it's at least given me a little bit more hope than I had today, which granted still isn't much, but a little bit more that maybe, just maybe, we can do something in the Big Ten tournament. I'm not saying win it, but maybe win a game. If we get the right matchup in round 2, win another one, maybe get to the weekend. Look, it would be the most in this Big Ten season that's made no sense, in this IU season that's been so up and down and topsy-turvy and not made a whole lot of sense. What would kind of, I guess, make more sense than us, going on a deep run in the Big Ten tournament because of how kind of inexplicable it would be. But anyway, I'm feeling slightly more confident right now that maybe we can win a couple games. What do you think?
Yeah, I wouldn't count them out. I think that it's all really going to depend on that first game and how they come out. this was a tough loss because obviously they thought they could win. I mean, it was clear the entire game they thought they were going to win. They played with that kind of confidence that they were going to find a way to eke it out, and you could tell that when they went down 9 or 11 and fought back. That's a really key indication of where the team is at mentally, is when you fall down on the road, do you bounce back or do you just fade? And this team earlier in the season, I think they would have faded or folded or just fallen apart. But no, they bounced back and they pushed hard, and that showed confidence, and that showed that they, felt that they belonged on that floor and could win. I'm sure beating Michigan at home had a lot to do with that. They knew they could beat them. For the tournament, again, I think it's going to come down to that first game. How do they come out? How do they play? Can they build more confidence with it? We've been saying all year, and this is my personal thing about young teams. There are two things that you need to have with a young team to win. You need to have confidence, and you need to have consistency. They're really developing that confidence. I've felt it for a couple weeks. They're getting more confident. They're starting to believe that they belong playing Big Ten basketball, individually and as a team. Now you've got to get to the consistency part, and unfortunately, that's the harder part to get to. And so you've just got to find consistency. And if they can come out the way they did against Michigan, the first game of the Big Ten tournament, regardless of who they play, and then sustain that level of intensity throughout most of the game, because we know there's going to be dips and it's going to go up and down. That's just the nature of the Big Ten. If they can sustain that intensity, I think that they could make a run. I definitely believe that. I don't know. I mean, I'm not confident that they could win it, but they could reel off 2 games, 2 maybe 3, and then once you reel off those first 2, if you get 2 wins, it's anybody's tournament at that point. We've seen crazy things happen in the Big Ten tournament. So once you get past that first game or 2, you're in it, you're in the mix. You have as much a chance to win as anybody. So, that typically holds true unless you're Indiana. But hey, this is a different team this year, so we'll see what happens. But I definitely think that it's going to depend on that first game how they come out, and if they come out with confidence, then I think they got a shot to do some damage.
All right. Did you want to make any final thoughts other than that about this game, this team, anything from the season?
Well, the regular season's over, and at the beginning of the season, I went back and listened, and my quote was that this season is going to be puzzling. It's going to frustrate the hell out of you. We're going to win some games we shouldn't. We're going to lose some games we shouldn't. And God, do I hate being right all the time. This has been it's been such an up and down season, but I think it's also one of those seasons where maybe in 2 years we look back and say, you know what, it wound up being worth it. That's just my assumption right now. I mean, people were saying after Crean's third year, oh, we should have been better than that, and then the next year we beat Kentucky, go to the Sweet 16, had a really great season, and that built up to last year. And so I think that it's one of those things where I think people's expectations were probably too high this year. I thought at top we'd be a top 25 team, between 20 and 25, and maybe win 20 regular season games. But we came close to that, so I'm not that disappointed. But I think people just, when you get used to winning, you lose a little perspective on what it takes to win. And having so many young guys on this team, it's played itself out over the year. I mean, exactly what we thought it would be. There were bad turnovers. The offense looked disjointed at times. Guys making boneheaded plays, fouls, taking bad shots. I mean, that's what happens when you have young players. There is no getting around it. And any team with any coach, with any system at any school would have struggled this way this year. Talent is not the only thing that wins you games. Experience is a huge part of it. I mean, 99% of teams that win an NCAA championship have experience on the roster. That's just an absolute fact. And so, yeah, we've got to go through a season like this to get those guys that experience. And next year, hopefully we bring those guys in, those new guys in. Hopefully Noah sticks around to, show us that he wants to win a title, and we can make a run. But this year has been one of those years that, yeah, it's frustrating, and at times it's been really fun. I mean, I love being live in person watching him beat Michigan. That was awesome. That was seeing Yogi just go off like that. So it's not like this season has been without fun parts and without really entertaining games and things like that. Even a few that ended up being losses. I thought today was an entertaining game for the most part, and wound up being a loss. That's a bummer, but you go through stuff like this, and hopefully, this team can put a nice run together in the Big Ten tournament and build towards next year.
Yeah, and the great irony of all the discussion about Indiana and how unpredictable this season has kind of been the predictability of it from the beginning, Ryan. Like you said, I mean, I think we all knew that this was going to be an up and down season, and especially early, and this team was going to struggle to find its footing. I think obviously whatever kind of the range of expectations were, this team hit the low end of it. There's no question, because I think, like I think we said, and Ryan, you can correct me, but I think most of us said, hey, the high point is probably you get in the NCAA tournament, maybe you win 9 or 10 Big Ten games, but there's a chance, if things don't go right, this could be an NIT team. It could finish, under 500, and that's what ended up happening. What I want to point out is, when Indiana played Purdue on February 15th, they got just drubbed, 82-64. It was horrible. The team just looked like they didn't have any fight left in it at the end of that game. And after that game, of course, is when the piece of tile fell at Assembly Hall. Indiana had a week off. And I think what happened is that since then, this team has kind of been the team we hoped it would be, because Indiana is 3-3 in that time. They beat Northwestern as they should have on the road. They lost the 2 games you would have expected them to lose. At Wisconsin, at Michigan, they lost those. And then, of course, they went 2-1 in the homestand to go 3-3. Well, if this team,
but the thing, and the thing is, not to cut you off, but the thing is, they could have won all 3 of those games, and they were up big on Wisconsin at the half. They're up on Michigan at the half, and they should have beat Nebraska. I mean, these games, it's not like they just got blown out. They played so much better in this stretch.
Yeah, and that's kind of the point, is that this team by the end kind of turned into the team that we thought. Not a great team by any means, and kind of hovering on good, but kind of a solid team that if they had played like this all year, maybe they're 500 in the Big Ten, and maybe they're on the bubble, and I think personally that having a couple of games there early in the Big Ten season that are tougher, replace some of those sub 300 teams with some better squads, maybe this team finds itself earlier. It's frustrating to look back on all the missed opportunities, and especially when you think of how many unforced turnovers contributed to that, and just silly mistakes like not being able to inbound the ball against Penn State, just stuff that seems really correctable. And so I think that Tom Crean is right that this team is starting to play better. I also think that hopefully he is able to take a look back on this season and maybe things he could have done differently to get him to this point a little bit quicker. And maybe you could have, maybe you couldn't have. But man, it does seem like there's some missed opportunities, because I would love to see. I mean, this is a team now that I think, if it were going into the NCAA tournament, would be ready to compete. Now, they certainly don't deserve a bid, and they're not going to get one, barring a miracle. But they've played their way into being a better team. To kind of being the team we'd hoped they'd be. They just lost too many games early. And games that were winnable that they should have won. And so, somewhere in there, hopefully, is a learning experience for the coaching staff, because I think this team is going to get better. This program, I think, is going to get better over the next couple years, because talented guys are going to gain more experience. But the next time that we have this kind of young group of, wild Colts, kind of like that team, Ryan, you were talking about 4 years ago, the year before the Kentucky game, when Victor and Will were freshmen, and Jordy and Christian Watford were sophomores, everybody thought we should have been better. The team is a lot like this one, and that team wasn't able to overcome the inexperience, and so we're seeing that from this team now. And so maybe from a coaching perspective, those are obviously the 2 constants with those 2 seasons. Hopefully there's something that can be taken, so the next time we have this kind of transition or rebuilding, or what we hope to be kind of a reloading year, we can be better than what we've been. Because clearly with an experienced team last year, some of those maybe halftime adjustments or substitution, things that Crean does that we criticize him for, the experienced team was able to overcome. And I think especially during that mid part of the Big Ten season, this team wasn't. And so hopefully in the future, when we come across a team like this, we're better able to handle it. I don't know, but certainly there will be another team like this, just the way college basketball is, the way we're recruiting. But I think the positive is the team is at least playing well now. Better now. Hopefully they can continue that into the Big Ten tournament, continue that into the NIT tournament, and create some positive momentum heading into next year. I think if you want to take the glass half full perspective, that is it. Certainly we try and provide that here on the Assembly Call while being realistic, but anyway, I was expecting to feel really down after this game today, and I don't feel down. I actually take some positives from it, even with the loss. So I suppose I'm feeling better than I thought. So that's why I can smile after a game like today. Thank you all for listening to another episode of the Assembly Call. We will be here Thursday, whenever the game is. I'm assuming, depending on work schedules and everything, but someone will be here. We'll have some kind of show for you after that game, whenever it is. We'll have to wait till tonight's games are done to see when Indiana plays, but we will be here. Make sure you go to assemblycall.com/subscribe and get on our email list to get Andy's in-depth analysis for the rest of this season, and also to get all the fun stuff we have planned for the offseason. All right, everybody. Thank you to everybody who has listened live today and for your continued support through this up and down Indiana season. We appreciate it. At the end of the day, all we have is each other, right? So we got to keep supporting each other through these rough games. All right. I'm your host, Jared Morris. We will talk to you soon. See you on Thursday.